So this is the final slide, hallelujah, of the special senses. Notice that, again, I'm going to be barely mentioning anything about the hearing, but we're going to completely focus on equilibrium. We've seen this thing before. We've seen the inner ear. We see the cochlea and all of its goodness and wonder, which helped us hear. But we're going to focus up here now. We've got some semicircular ducts. We got ourselves a vestibula and all that goodness, which is all responsible for equilibrium. I'm going to go through some terms here very shortly, and I like using pictures, as you're probably all aware. So I'm going to be kind with you now and show you this slide. I'm not going to go through it because I'm here and now, because it's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about. So take a screenshot, do what you got to do, fill this out, pause the video, whatever you got to do if you're using my notes. But these are terms I'm going to be using. Moving on. Starting off with the vestibular apparatus. We are within ourselves in this region here, and within this vestibular apparatus. We're not playing with the semicircular ducts quite yet, but within inside of it, we see a nice little plane between the utricle and the saccule. Amber waves of gray, otoliths. Yes, otoliths. You're going to see little stalks or membranous things filled with little otoliths at the tippy top of this membrane. These otoliths, let's break down the word. Otto means ear, lith means rocks. You got itty bitty teeny tiny rocks at the tippy top. And just like amber waves of grain, if something comes along and you jiggle it a little bit, they jiggle quite hard. And they jiggle very well. Like your mama's favorite Jello salad yumminess. Ugh. But within it, why on earth would we want something like that? Why on earth would we need something like that? Within it, the little sneaky hair cells that we kind of mentioned in hearing. Okay, yeah, I mentioned hearing one more time. I apologize. Within it, we have the stereocilia again, that if you jiggle it just right, these little stereocilia move, and these cells sense this movement through the passage of this potassium from the endolymph rather than perilymph this time. Endolymph is in the vestibula, which allows that potassium to gush in, which then interacts with those special little neurons to say, hey, we're moving this particular direction. We're moving left or right, we're moving up or down. Notice I'm not saying swirling or twirling or all that stuff. The vestibula is responsible for something called static equilibrium. Whether you're going up or down, left or right, side to side, that's all it really cares about. And these two parts that govern it have these membranes oriented in such a way that if you go up or down, the otoliths jiggle, the stereocilia, which jiggle the cell, which make the cells go, and you get that information. The saccule is the one that senses up and down, while the utricle notices the side to side. So with up and down, the ride that I think of is this at Knott's Berry's farm, one of my least favorite rides in the whole world. Yuck! I can't do this. I hate heights. If it pulls me up, I get nervous and more and more nervous as my equilibrium senses that I'm getting pulled up in this crappy little elevator. And then when it drops me, I can just go, oh, you dirty sons of guns, I hate this thing. I told you to let me know when I'm being dropped. All that otoliths is getting pushed this way, which bends the hairs upwards too, which says, hey, we are falling at a rapid rate, and I don't like it. Well, at least for me, it's I don't like it. The utricle, this is more of my feel. You give me a sports car, you give me a linear motion thing where I can accelerate nice and fast, that's fantastic. The utricle is telling me I'm going accelerating really fast forward, really fast backward, really forward to really quick to the side or side to side, whatever. My good old-fashioned static equilibrium. These little otoliths helping bend those stereo cells as the jello jiggles. So I am going to be doing a little bit of a favor, basically just summarizing what I just said. Here it is right here for what we talked about for the vestibular cochlea, the vestibular apparatus. Going to go ahead and move on. But the question is, I mentioned something. The next question we should ask is, we just talked about static equilibrium going up and down, side to side, forward, backwards. But what about like swirly twirling? Like maybe you're bored out of your mind right now. You're listening to a wireless video wirelessly, and you're like swirling around in your chair. What explains the swirliness? How do you know that you're swirly twirling? How do you know you're doing a cartwheel? How do you know you're doing something in between? Well, we got something called a semicircular duct. Yes, ducts or kind of hints at that these things are hollow tubes, and they're hollowed out and filled with endolymph. And when you swirl and twirl something, as you swirl and twirl, that endolymph swirls and twirls and passes by at the base of these things, of these semicircular ducts, and pushes on these little hairs called crista. And these crista sense that movement. Well, they don't sense it properly, forgive me, but the hair cells, the stereocilia that are embedded in it, just like the amber waves, a grain of otolith goodness in the vestibula, bend. And as they bend a specific direction, they're saying, oh yes, you are swirling and twirling this direction. And if you go in the opposite direction and push this way, it goes, oh yes, you are swirling and twirling the opposite direction now. That's pretty swell. So it's that liquid swirling through these things and coming down, bearing up against this crista, which bends these hair cilia that says, hey, we're moving, we're swirling, and we're twirling. Now we can swirl and twirl in different ways. Again, that semicircular duct lying more parallel to the ground swirls and twirls when you do a spin in the liquid inside of it, spins and twirls when you do a spin in the chair, or you do a little teacup ride in Disneyland, or you do the cartwheel thingy, which I still can't do cartwheel, so this is probably very poorly exercised in me. And then you got the in-betweensies. That sort of senses, hey, as you're doing the cartwheelie, maybe you're failing. Okay, this one maybe I have really good and really well adapted. So this is me talking again. This is the slide that summarizes what I just talked about. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that or whatever, pause. I'm going to go ahead and move on so we can take a look-see. So that information, by the way, that stuff in the semicircular stuff that we're measuring is called the dynamic equilibrium. Are you swirling and twirling? Static equilibrium is, are you going up and down, side to side, forward and back? Now that swirling and twirling and all that stuff is conveyed via the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. That sounds really familiar, doesn't it? Now, what's really neat and unique about this information that is being processed through is actually, of course, it's going to go to your somatosensory information in the vestibular portion of that cerebral cortex, but you're going to notice that it goes to different cranial nerves, in particular 3 really important cranial nerves, the ocular motor, the trochlear, and abducens. And hopefully you remember, these things are responsible for moving your eyes. So why on earth would there have a direct connection to these things or these nuclei? Well, if you think about it, you kind of want you moving around to be adaptable, to help your eyes follow your movement and go with you as you make those sudden changes. This also explains vertigo, the 2 different types of vertigo. There's one type of vertigo where you have little otoliths that have freed from the vestibular apparatus and are now rubbing up or getting pushed up against this crista and the dynamic equilibrium at the base of that